Good evening. Welcome to Learn Live UAE. Another episode, another week. I'm really excited to speak with our guest this evening because I think he's got lots of great things to share, and I think it's really timely, especially given the last kind of 18 months. What's happened for me in the last week? I finished my year 11 tag marking. That's felt like a bit of a milestone today, which was quite nice to get through and see all of the amazing results. On top of that, our students, a couple of weeks ago now, right at the kind of end of April, start of May, competed in the British Physics Olympiad competition run in partnership with Oxford University's Physics Department, along with Isaac Physics, who's a physics kind of resourcer for educators, and our students did awesome. It's the first time we ever did it as a school. We entered, I think, 58 students, came away with 23 commendations, 15 bronzes, 14 silvers and 3 golds. So I was really pleased with that. I thought the students did amazingly well. So that was my highlight of my week, actually. If I come back and think to that, it was getting those results in for the students and seeing those results come back through that are great success. They don't know it yet, though. That's one of the great things. I'm saving that as a great piece of news for them until they've finished their end of year exams. So I'm keeping that one under wraps for now, but I'm happy to share it with you guys. And if any students are watching it, you'll find out very, very soon, ladies and gents. Anyway, this evening, I'm really excited to welcome Mr. Wilson onto the show. Daniel Wilson, you most likely, if you're in the region or in education, have seen him sharing. You can find him on Twitter at The Student Leads. He hosts a really phenomenally helpful website for educators, but I won't introduce it. I think it's more important that we hear from Daniel about his website. So without further ado, I'm really excited to welcome Daniel onto the show. Daniel, good evening.
Hi, how are you?
Very well, thanks. How are you?
Very well, thanks myself too. Thank you.
Thank you for giving up this time on a Monday night. I know at this time of the year, the days seem long, although the days get longer and it's lighter for longer. We're at that kind of pivotal point in the year where the crunch can often feel like it's coming. So thank you very much for...
It's my pleasure. We're all very busy at the moment, I think, with reports and everything else that's going on. It's my pleasure.
We are, but soon enough, it'll be the summer holidays and people will either be travelling here, there and everywhere or staying put.
Fingers crossed.
My first question really, we were sort of talking off air about a few things, and that's you're almost a year into the region. What made you decide to move to international teaching?
I think I spent a few years in school in the UK in some different settings. Working different jobs. I worked as a teaching assistant, a learning support assistant, did my training obviously, and then became a class teacher. And I think I just wanted to experience something a little bit different, test myself, challenge myself, and just push myself to try something completely new. My wife was also very, very interested in exploring the Middle East, particularly we've got some other friends that are out here in Qatar. So we thought we'd give it a whirl. And obviously it's been a very tricky experience moving out during COVID. But it's been a positive experience on the whole, I feel, and it's been really good to work with a different group of people in school, a much larger group of people. Obviously, my school in the UK was a 2-form entry. Here we have 6 in each year group, so very different but very rewarding at the same time.
That's a really interesting kind of route that you've taken in there. You started off as a support assistant and then moved into teaching. What made you decide? What kind of sparked the I want to move to be the teacher in the room rather than the support teacher in the room? What sparked that decision?
I definitely wanted to be a teacher the whole time. And actually, funny enough, I got into teaching very late. I got into teaching in my 30s after my wife sort of gave me a bit of a wake-up call. Between us, we sort of decided that I need a real job, and so I became a teacher. It was something that ran in the family. My mum was a teacher, my gran was a teacher, so I followed the route of going in for some experience in a school where I was at Farnborough, and then followed the advice of the head teacher there to become a teaching assistant and complete my level 3 in assistant. And then after that, I did my degree whilst obviously TAing still, and then did my training year in the same school. So it's always been a progression path, just following the advice and wisdom of the senior leadership in the schools I've worked in. And it's worked out very well for me. I'm very thankful to those people who's given me advice over the years.
Yeah, it's a really humbling but rewarding profession, I think. I've always maintained that. You know, I'm 10 years in now myself. And my wife always reminds me, you know, even if I'm having a great day or a bad day, she's always like, what you do is really important. And it really is. And it's amazing that quite often that's not always thought of, but I do feel really appreciated as an educator, actually, by and large, which I think's actually quite nice, especially compared to my former life pre-education.
Yeah. Did you find, have you taught in the UK? Sorry, I don't know.
Yeah, so I did 5 years in two different state schools, one in inner city Nottingham, one in the kind of leafy suburbs of Hampshire, and then 5 years in an independent school, all boys independent school just outside Reading, and then I'm nearly finished my third year here internationally. So God, I'm 13 years in. I'm not just 10. So
did you feel the same appreciation in the UK?
I did, yeah. I think so. I was really lucky with that. I think it comes back, as you know, as you'll know yourself, it comes back to the relationships that you foster in the classroom. All the other stuff is, you know, it by and large doesn't change too much. But being around the students, that's the most rewarding part of the job, isn't it? And then being around your colleagues that you can support and can support you. Next question then really is what led to the formation of Morning Challenge?
I'm going to sort of pop up a presentation in a second, which kind of explains it all. But actually, I think when I became a teacher, my first school was in Bedford as a class teacher. And I was very lucky to be working in a group of staff, one of whom was closely linked to an Erasmus project, the Erasmus 3T project, which involved Finnish, Danish and English teachers coming together and visiting schools in different countries and experiencing time, talent and technologies in those three countries. So randomly, very, very luckily, in my NQT year, I was asked very early on if I wanted to be a part of this project. And I got to jet off to Denmark first, Copenhagen. And very quickly, we visited some schools in the inner city. And I found that the student autonomy, the student-led classroom there was really, really amazing. The way that the children worked without being constantly pushed or nagged was just enthralling to me. It was something that I wanted to get into my own classroom very quickly. And I came back with 101 ideas that I wanted to trial and error in my classroom. I think after that, I spent a good year working with my year 4 class, just turning them into student teachers. And if you want to read about that journey, it's all there on my blog. My page was originally the student-led classroom.co.uk. It sort of evolved into Morning Challenge, but it was originally the landing space for my write-ups and blogs about student-led teaching. And the culmination of all the things we did that year ended up with a student-teacher day where I basically sat at the back of the classroom in silence for the entire school day whilst they ran the day of my resources. They had to choose teachers, they had to get themselves sorted for lunch and breaks, they had to deal with disputes, and it was an absolutely fascinating experience. But obviously that came after a lot of hard work through the year. And also I got loads of ideas from people on Twitter as well. Always good to find little snippets that you can trial in your classroom. So all credit to those people. They've always been quoted on my site as well in my blogs.
Yeah, I think that's really important, especially in this day and age where there are so many teachers, not enough, but so many teachers on social media is credit where credit is due for an original idea or resource. And I know that you receive that back tenfold with your site. You've paid it forwards and are continuing.
Absolutely, that's what I want to do. I definitely want to pay it forward.
What was your kind of biggest takeaway, I guess, in the difference being involved in that project and seeing kind of education as a whole in Denmark compared to back in the UK?
Obviously, in the UK, through schools are very rare. So it's not often you'll walk into a school and you'll see very young children working with very old children. Actually, it was mind blowing just to see these sort of five-year-olds hanging around on the playgrounds next to much older children. That's not something we often get in the UK, I don't think. So yeah, just trying to form that dynamic where older children act with responsibility and care to their younger students and share their learning, because I honestly believe the best way to learn is through teaching. The best way to master your understanding is by repeating those inputs to other people. So that's something that's definitely embedded in all my classrooms now, and that definitely came from Denmark.
And it's quite nice, because quite often you reach a point in a year where you get student leaders of some sort, whether they're digital student leaders or representatives of year groups, or head boy, head girl, anything in between all of that. And if you ask the students what one of the best days of the year was, it's quite often when the older students get to go down and be around the younger students.
Absolutely, yes.
I think we could probably do more of that in schools.
We desperately need to. I really do think so. It's so important. Like you say, just these little things. You hear about older children going down to the lower years to read, and how thrilled the younger children are to have those students come in. And I honestly believe that children of perhaps a lower ability are much more likely to open up and talk to their peers than perhaps a teacher at times. So it's so important to have those higher ability children in your classroom, able to wander around and share their knowledge. And obviously at the moment, because of COVID, that's been incredibly hard this year. It's been very draining for me as someone who loves to have the children on their feet, sharing their knowledge and discussing things with other children. To have them sat down and constantly nagging them to stay in their seats has been really, really hard for me. Really hard. Yeah,
we're kind of going sort of full circle. The title of our show today was The Importance of Routine and Getting Your Day Off to a Flying Start.
Yeah.
Kind of thinking about the last 18 months, I guess, is in real terms. How do you feel like, positively or negatively, the last 18 months has influenced the morning routine for students?
I think the children in my classroom have managed to keep a fairly good routine, actually, just through the use of my website, because when they come in, they're used to what they're doing, they have an expectation and they'll do it. Like I say, it has been more difficult because usually in the morning, I would do something called dynamic seating, which is where I would ask my children to pick or choose someone they feel they could help out or they can help be helped by. So they choose their own seats, but it's very much a mature decision based on whether they can help or be helped. And because of this COVID situation, we can't do that. We can't just ask the children to sit where they want. They've got to stick to the same seats every morning. So that in a way has been bad for that whole process. At the same time, I do feel like they're still getting a lot of work done in the morning because they do have that solid routine. They still know what they need to do and achieve. And they are getting so much done in the first 15, 20 minutes in the classroom. And I'll show you what I sort of offer. And hopefully, I know it's inspired a lot of people around the world, and hopefully it will inspire a few more tonight. It's just a really nice way to get the kids going and engaged as soon as they come in first thing.
I really like that collaborative aspect that you talked about there, about asking the students to find someone that they can help or they think can help them. Andy Price, I'm sure you've heard of him. He's a massive educator in the region. He's a big proponent of kind of flexi seating.
Okay.
What are the differences, I guess, between flexi seating and the strategy that you're using?
Perhaps my strategy that I believed I had coined was actually coined by Andy Price with this flexi seating. What could you explain flexi seating?
I'm not really sure. We'll have to get Andy.
I've not heard of flexi. I imagine it's probably very similar. All that I'm trying to do is make sure that all the children put themselves in a position where they can learn to the best of their abilities. And I think if you seat children and you keep them in those same spaces throughout the year or for long extended periods, then they're not necessarily doing that. And I think you've got to reach a point with your class where they've sort of taken ownership of their own learning. They understand the importance of moving themselves forward. And that's a really difficult task. But once you've got these routines in place and they can actually say to themselves, I'm not just going to sit next to my friend because I want to have a chat. I'm going to sit next to so-and-so because I know I'm going to come out better at maths at the end of this lesson. It's just a beautiful thing. So yeah, it's a tricky concept, but it's one that's really, really beneficial and progressive, I guess.
I'd imagine that also kind of breeds collegiality amongst your class where, children are children, not everybody always gets on, and quite often teachers have to work quite hard to
absolutely
but foster relationships across a classroom. And I can imagine a strategy like that, certainly supports you as the educator in the room, building not only those relationships, but the collegiateness of a classroom towards a common goal of learning. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not going to lie and say it's always perfect and it runs smoothly every time. Of course, particularly in the UK, it's much more difficult, I find, with the attitudes of some children. However, I think it's something that definitely moved the class forward, and they did become better at working with one another and more respectful towards one another. There was definitely progress in that by the end of the year. It was very obvious to see.
Yeah, I think that I really like your honesty there, and anyone that's in education will know learning's not linear, and that doesn't that applies to anything from learning new content to behaviour, relationships, routine, all of those different parts of a classroom, and I think that's really important cycle of learning to go through with your class.
Yeah.
Daniel, I'm mindful of time. We've chewed the fat for 17 minutes. And it's been awesome. Shall we get your presentation?
Yes, of course. Though actually, I think I've discussed half of it already. So let's put up what I got.
If anyone's watching, just while Daniel's sharing a screen, if you've got any questions or you want to send any praise his way because you are a user of his website, which we'll show you in a little bit, morningchallenge.co.uk, please do fire in your questions or your comments. I'll just bring your presentation up now. Okay, Daniel, you are good to go.
Okay, so yeah, I've discussed a bit of this already, but yeah, I just wanted to discuss how the Morning Challenge had evolved and how it sort of ended up where it has today, and the inspirations that I got to get me to this point. So on the screen at the moment, you can see one of my very early boards. I began putting these challenges together when I was a teaching assistant in Aldershot. And I was working with a really, really fantastic educator at the time. He was absolutely brilliant with the children, so inspirational for me, and sort of taught me that men can teach, because I've been surrounded by female teachers my whole life. I hadn't had much interaction with men in the classroom. So that was really positive influence to me as a man in the classroom. Obviously, the original boards, they didn't have too much content that could be attempted by the children. So they definitely evolved over the years. So I'm just going to talk about how they've sort of evolved and how I've taken different aspects from different teachers, good practice that I've seen, put that together to produce what I now present on the website. So as I talked about earlier, very first blog post, and that was after I came back from Copenhagen, from part of the Erasmus 3T project, where we talked about time, talent and technology. And obviously we looked into many Copenhagen classrooms, and I saw some fantastic classroom teaching going on there. And I think the thing that impressed me most was walking into a now friend's classroom, seeing him sat in the middle of the class. He was running a computing lesson, all the children working around him. He was answering questions, but the children absolutely knew what the expectations were. They were talking to each other rather than coming to him as a first point of help. And it was just very self-autonomous, and I really liked that approach. Obviously, when I came back, I said that I started experimenting with these things myself. And all these things that I did in the classroom built up to the end of the year student silent teacher day, where I would be sat at the back of the classroom, taking notes whilst the children taught themselves with my resources. That's listed on my website on the blog. So do feel free to have a read of that if you're interested. It's something that anyone can achieve, given some time and a little bit of patience. And like I said, also, the blog began as a student-led classroom, but it very quickly developed into morningchallenge.co.uk, simply because Morning Challenge was something I've been developing for a fairly long period of time. And actually, I really, really wanted to share it. I honestly believed, and still do believe, that it's so beneficial for what we can do in the classroom. I've written here that, using the UK system as an example, schools are open for approximately 190 days per academic year. So for most of the people in the UK, you work in around about that amount of days. It doesn't vary too much around the world, so we'll come close to that figure. And based on that, children are spending roughly 50 hours a year in that registration period. So I think it's really, really important to focus on what they're doing and achieve as much as possible in that time. And it is possible to achieve lots. I've quoted myself on here. This was from my first blog about the morning challenge. Many of us manage a partially student-led classroom without perhaps even having considered it. I've seen the concept of the morning challenge in use in many learning spaces over the years. The concept being that the children are presented with something to do as they enter in the morning. This is the perfect example of students learning a routine, and if it's consistent and offers those taking part something interesting to focus on and to keep them engaged, can be the foundation on which the building blocks of the student-led classroom may be laid. I just think that's important because the morning challenge is the very first thing that children will do in the morning. They'll come in off the playground and they'll crack straight on with their work. And if they're given something special, something engaging, something they know they want to be doing, they're going to produce a lot. They're going to be very productive during that first 15, 20 minutes. I worked in a lot of classrooms and I talked to a lot of teachers and a lot of people on Twitter and interacted with people here, there and everywhere. And I've just made a list of some of the things that I've seen going on in classrooms or have been told that are going on in classrooms. And actually, independently, all of these things are really, really important. Wellbeing has a huge focus at the moment, absolutely rightly so. Reading, really, really important. Finishing off, just having a chat, finding about each other's days, particularly during COVID times, when some of us might be feeling down. Colouring in, absolutely. Practicing maths, really important. Handwriting, perfect. And proofreading and correcting, absolutely going through books and spotting those mistakes. But what I really wanted to do was bring all these things together, or as much as possible, and give the children the opportunity to do what they want in the morning, perhaps. They can come in and choose 1, 2, 3 of the activities. My higher ability children will often get through the whole slide. And obviously, back before COVID, they'll be walking around helping each other out, sharing ideas and knowledge, and having that dynamic seating approach where they're looking to help someone or be helped. And I've just written a few of the benefits that I think you get from this approach. So children enter the classroom and immediately begin work with a solid understanding of the expectations. That's really, really important to me. We definitely don't waste a second in my classroom. A wide range of subjects are recapped, pre-taught and introduced for the first time. So I'm often going over things that we've done previously, particularly when it comes to things like maths. Very recently, I've tried to introduce concepts that the White Rose is due to introduce in the next month or so. And there have been massive, massive benefits in my classroom where once we've introduced the subject in the White Rose, my class have already been doing it for 2 or 3 weeks and they can absolutely nail the work very, very easily and move on much more quickly than perhaps some other students. Higher ability learners have the opportunity to teach, e.g. walking around the classroom and sharing their ideas and knowledge. And very importantly for us as teaching staff as well, teachers are free to complete daily admin tasks. So morning in my classroom is a very peaceful time. The children drift in, they sit down, they open their books and get on with their work. There's no nagging involved. I'll explain the task. I'll run through the morning challenge for them after they've settled. And then I'll return to my desk, take the register, get through any admin, any paperwork that I've got without any interruption. The children are well versed in the fact that they need to be asking their partners or people on close by tables for help. Of course, if they're really in need, then I can go and visit them at their tables. But generally, they can deal with pretty much anything I throw at them as a group. And I've just introduced the slides here, but I think it might be much better if I actually take you to the website. So if I stop sharing this.
Yeah, please do. Anyone out there that is using morningchallenge.co.uk, please do either message Daniel on social media, or if you're watching this now live, please do throw some comments in. I really like the collaborative approach, and something that's worked really well for us at VisAd over the last kind of 2 years is the menu approach, where you give students the opportunity to choose a few things. I think that's really important for students.
Absolutely. That was a big focus of my current school as well, the differentiation, to be honest. I think it's something perhaps we're moving away a little bit from in many aspects of teaching. But with the morning challenge, I just felt it was important to have children have the ability to pick and choose, because if they come in and see a group of things that perhaps are too difficult for them, well, they're not going to be interested. So we do have a range every day. There's always something for everyone going on. Hopefully you can see my screen. Is that the case?
Not yet, no. So if you click the share button, share screen.
Let me just head back to yours and share
Get
screen.
a new tab up. There we go. I've got it. Okay.
Great.
I have your screen. I'll just pop it out until you've got morning challenge up. So we get a new tab up there. Yeah, there we go. Right.
Okay, fantastic. Yep. Sorry, I'm not very techie for a man that runs a website. So yeah, this is the Morning Challenge website. What I've aimed to do is just produce a series of click and go resources, as I would call them. So resources that teachers can literally walk in the morning, open up, put on the big screen and forget about. So nothing difficult about them whatsoever. So here we've got some options of the morning challenges. We have morning challenges for ages 7 to 9, so your lower key stage 2, and your morning challenges for 9 to 11, your upper key stage 2. The first challenge I created was for the upper key stage 2, but I introduced the lower key stage 2 around about September last year. So they're still being updated. I've got about 3 months to add, but we're nearly there and I'm always ahead with them. It's a lot of work, a big slog to get everything up. But let's have a look. If you click on Let's Go, we get the calendar up and then we select today's date. Let's choose tomorrow, so the 8th of June. It's as simple as clicking on that. And then we have a morning challenge for the day. Notice there's a little image here. If I click that, we should go full screen. There we go. So if you can imagine you've got this on your interactive whiteboard, this will be full screen, nicely there for the children, very engaging, colourful, eye-catching, and this should get them interested straight away. So on each morning challenge, we have a variety of different challenges. We have our word of the day. We have a well-being chart with some emojis. So I always ask the children to draw the emoji that suits their mood and share a sentence about how they're feeling if they'd like to. We have a selection of maths puzzles, quick maths. We have times tables. Now you'll notice here, this is lower key stage 2 and they're doing the 90 times table. This is simply because for the last 5 or 6 months, we've been going through the 1 to 12s. And now we've moved on to harder stuff because they've absolutely nailed them. They're very good at them now. So I do challenge them in the morning. And just to explain to them the concepts, 90 times table is the same as the 9s with a 0 on the end. So very, very simple there. My favorite challenge of all on each slide is the mistakes. I get an email almost every single day from a teacher around the world pointing out a mistake that I've made on the slide. This was actually a concept that came from a man called Gary Wilson, no relation. I was lucky enough to hear him speak in the UK, and he's very famous for his achievement in boys, or raising achievement in boys. And during his spiel, he told us all about how he had developed really good working relationships with the boys in his class by allowing them and encouraging them to spot mistakes that he had made. And that instantly clicked with me. And the next day, my slides began including mistakes. So you'll probably find spelling mistakes, punctuation errors. You don't need to let me know, although I'm sure I make some of my own as well, non-intentional along the way. I've added do something kind for someone, which is always nice, getting some nice comments off the children in the morning and them being very kind to one another. We've got a little bit of handwriting in there. We've always got a main challenge. In this case, tomorrow, we've got making a list of A to Z animals. And something that I introduced around about 7 or 8 months ago now, the geography. I think every classroom I've worked in, anywhere I've been, the standard, the level of geography knowledge has always been absolutely terrible. And it's something that I feel is really, really important. So every day we'll have either a country of the day or a landmark of the day or a mountain or river of the day. And at the end of our time in registration, if it's me running the next session, they're not going off to something specialized, I'll always give them 4 or 5 minutes to have a browse on the iPads to see what's going on in those countries. And they like finding me pictures of foods particularly, and we share them on our teams, which is really nice. So they've made massive jumps forward in their geography and locational knowledge in the last few months. If I just head back, and I'll just quickly put up a upper key stage 2 challenge as well. Same concept, so same calendar. And if we hit the 8th, the only thing that will be the same here is the country or the landmark. That'll be the same on both slides, but we have a different word of the day. No well-being on the upper key stage 2 slides. We have today in history instead, which is also very important, I feel. The maths is always a little bit trickier. We have the same spot the mistakes challenge, but different mistakes, of course. The kindness aspect is still in there. This time, because it's upper key stage 2, rather than the handwriting, we've converted it to a word of the day in a sentence. And again, we've got our main challenge of the day. So 2 completely different challenges for 2 different sets of children and ability levels. They just really, really enjoy getting their teeth into these in the morning and producing as much as possible before going through the answers. A lot of people also email me for answers. And actually, I find the process of going through the answers with the children in the morning, correcting mistakes and misunderstandings is really, really positive for us all. So there's a massive learning process going on in the first 15 minutes in my classroom, and hopefully in anyone else's who's used the site.
I just want to pick up on a thread there that I guess before you had the site and where it is now, how did you notice a difference in kind of starting the day with a bang, like that, where you have lots of options, choice, opportunity for collaboration with the students, whereas prior to curating and creating all of this content, the students would probably look straight at you and go, right, what do we do, Mr. Wilson?
Yeah, I mean, for me, luckily enough, I was making these from the time I was TAing. So I had some very early examples of the morning slides from the first day I walked in as a class teacher, although much less content on. I think we started with a word of the day and a challenge. That was all we had back then. Yeah. So I've always had something they've walked into and had that routine. But like I said, working in many, many different classrooms, I've never worked in a classroom that's had the same thing going on every day. We've never had that sort of level of routine. And I think at times the children can be very chatty, perhaps off task, which is okay. It's okay, but I would prefer my children to be doing something productive from the get-go. I do feel like like I said, there's 50 hours a year that are potentially wasted, or potentially a very, very positive thing on their development.
It's quite a large number when you actually think about that. That's more than a working week of time that you can actually maximize with your students. And I like the point where not only do you offer the opportunity for them to collaborate, but actually you can work with the students and solve some of the riddles, or at least help them along the way with some of the problems to get the day off. Question for you though is, what's the most important part of your morning routine outside of the classroom? We'll flip it slightly.
Wow, what a question. What's the most important? Probably a coffee, to be honest. Do you know what? I love to have things ready the day before. I would be the worst supply teacher in the world. I have to have everything ready the day before. So before I leave school in the evening, I'll have printed out all my objectives and anything that's going to be stuck into books, etc. It's just so I'm ready to walk in the morning. And when I walk in, I can literally sit down, whack the morning challenge up on the screen, if I want, put my feet up for 5 minutes and just relax. So yeah, just a coffee probably.
Yeah, it gives you a little bit of headspace. For me, it was, I probably spent 6 months of this year outside walking or jogging, or at least trying to jog. But now it's too hot for that.
Absolutely.
Now it's 100% straight to an espresso machine.
Yeah.
Coffee. And a bit of peace and quiet before then getting my dogs out.
I did used to thoroughly enjoy walking to my school in Bedford. It was a nice sort of 15-20 minute walk every day, which was nice. But no, far too hot here for that.
Yeah, slightly different in the Middle East. Yeah. It's not a place for walking to work. However, I've seen some educators not only walking but doing half marathons at the moment. In this heat in the mornings. So
I've got a colleague who runs a good 5 or 6 kilometers every morning, and he comes in sweating, meets me in the lift. He doesn't have to be in at the same time as me, half an hour later. And he's always, hi, we're dripping with sweat. So yeah, fair play if you can do that.
Yeah, not for me right now. A little bit too hot for that. Coming back to then kind of your students, your classroom, starting the day off right. And being a content creator, have you always been a creative, or is this just something that you've seen as a need for your classroom, thinking back to that 50 hours?
I think I definitely have. This is going to sound incredibly sad, but I get real joy out of making PowerPoints. Just just to see the look on the children in my class face when I pop open a new PowerPoint I made and there's just something flashy or exciting on there. I've had I wouldn't say rows, but discussions with a lot of people on Twitter about how PowerPoint should look. And I'm adamant personally that I think children, no child has ever come to me and told me they really enjoyed playing a black and white video game. Children love to look at screens. Sadly, I think we should be doing less screen time, but they do love looking at screens. And I think whilst they're looking at screens, stuff needs to be engaging and eye-catching. You probably noticed the dog on there as well, Leo. He's their little mascot. So they love working with Leo as well and doing his word of the day and solving his questions. Yes, they really enjoy those sort of colourful slides.
I think that the literacy element of that is hugely important. I've just finished reading a book, Teaching and Learning Through Oracy, and I've wrote a blog a little while ago about basically Oracy in a virtual classroom, and I think having that constant, learning opportunity for the students every day, with a word of the day and the context of that word and asking them to use it in a sentence. I think that's hugely important. Have you found that through doing that over time, that has had a positive impact on the students' language? Or
absolutely, definitely. I think I've gone a bit off the cuff with our word of the day, because what I didn't want to do is follow your sort of spelling rule examples that you'd get on a twinkle. Very boring. In my opinion, what I wanted to do was introduce a range of new words that they potentially wouldn't have heard. I think this really came to the forefront when we were doing testing at the back end of last year in the UK, or perhaps the year before, I forget. But lots of words popping up in SATs, for instance, that just the children would never have heard of. And at that point, I started introducing words that were much more uncommon, perhaps. Just so they've got that interest in vocab, and they can look up. And when they do look up the meanings online, they'll often look for synonyms as well. We do a lot of work on that in the mornings. And of course, we've got the suffix on there as well. I do ask them if they can change a suffix. So not just using the original root, adding a suffix onto words and slightly changing the meanings, how they're used in a sentence, which is really beneficial too.
Yeah, and quite often I think we can in education get caught up in the fact we have to follow the curriculum, but actually the curriculum's more than just kind of the roadmap that we might normally do. And knowledge is so rich, and there's so much out there that we can add in, that we're almost doing a disservice to the students by not going slightly off the beaten track and giving them wider experiences, information that benefits them in their learning. Just as a little side note, I agree. I agree. So, another sort of question then around your website, I think, and kind of how it has evolved. Because although I'm known in some respects for kind of ed tech, and I've got a website, but I'm not I'm a teacher. I'm a physics teacher. And I've taught myself. How have you gone about your own professional development in kind of the last couple of years? Because it's changed quite drastically for me, I think.
It's been really, really hard, hasn't it? I mean, to be honest, to be frank, I haven't done much CPD in the last year at all. There's definitely opportunities at my school that perhaps I should be making more of. I think I've just felt a bit overwhelmed, like many of us have. We've been really, really busy. As professionals, dealing with everything that's been going on, and jumping in and out of distance and in-school learning. So for me, at the back of my mind as CPD, I know I should be doing an entire Apple course by the end of the year, which I've somehow managed to avoid. But yeah, I need to get that done, and I need to start thinking about it again, because it's not something that I like to do to stagnate. So yeah, it's been really, really tricky.
I think that a lot of teachers have kind of lacked this year is a little bit of headspace. I think with everything that's going on, there've been so many changes so quickly. A similar question then, but how have you upskilled yourself with building the website, because you're on iteration 3, I think you said earlier on.
That's right. I'm just incredibly picky with my content, a little bit OCD in many ways. And if I spot a mistake, or if I spot something that I don't particularly like, I will end up just doing the whole cycle of the challenge again, which means another 366 slides. I'm not going to do that anymore. I promised myself this is the end. So when I reach the end of updating the current key stage, upper key stage 2 slides, and I've filled out the lower key stage 2 slides, I'll be finishing off the story starter section. I've just introduced a new math starter section as well. So those are going to be taking my time up very shortly. So hopefully by the end of the next academic year, we'll have 4 nice click and go resource sections, one for every single day of the year, that teachers can use in
Inshallah, as they say.
Yeah.
What's next for you then, Daniel? Because obviously you've invested a lot of time and energy into creating something for the people. Are you involved in any other projects, or are you just going to sit back and enjoy what you've created that helps many educators across the globe?
We chatted briefly, didn't we, about how I didn't really want to end up charging anyone for anything. It's hard. But what I really would like to do is to get some links going with authors. I feel like for me, if I had nice, high quality resources made by professional designers or people that are very good at their job, also fantastic content, so good teachers working on it, sort of officially approved by authors who have said, yes, you can use my book and you can have full access to it, and I agree with what you're teaching and the way that you're doing it. Wouldn't that be a lovely thing to have for free? So I've got ideas. I think I know what I want to do. I'm not sure how I'm going to achieve them currently. I probably at some point need to get some help with all this, but I don't really want to give up any of my site either at the same time. So it's a little bit tricky. It's hard managing everything by yourself, but it is my baby, if you know what I mean. And I'm very certain about the way I want things to look and how they're run.
Well, if anyone is out there thinking, actually, I wouldn't mind helping Daniel out, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Probably through the website. There's a contact page on the website that makes it very easy to contact me, or just daniel@themorningchallenge.co.uk.
There we go. So if you are out there and you're thinking, actually, I wouldn't mind helping out, or you're an author or a publisher, and you're thinking that sounds like a nice thing to get involved with for the good of the people, and you're watching this back, please do get in touch with Daniel, and I'm sure he would appreciate your help. I'm going to change tact ever so slightly now and ask you something slightly different and probably not in line with the show, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
And that's you mentioned kind of technology and how arguably students, and I agree with this, have spent probably too much time on technology in many respects over the last kind of year, regardless of where you are in the world. What would you like to see stay for good moving forwards in education, and what would you kind of put into room 101, as it were?
Tricky, isn't it? I think perhaps with technology, there's just too many options at times. I'd like to see more of a finish approach, actually, which is sort of very much tried, tested, what works, what doesn't, rather than having to learn 101 different apps and have things that I don't really understand popping up on my weekly planning. I think I'd like to know how to use a few things very well. I think there's some educators at my school. A guy that I work with in year 4 pops up that sort of knows every app going, and it's fantastic. And I'm sure his classroom is absolutely buzzing every time he gets one of these apps out. And I'm on the sort of other end of the spectrum. It sort of scares me to be introduced to all these new things. So maybe just a bit more uniformity in the way that we use apps in the classroom. That would be very, very nice. And what do I want to stay? I think I definitely want to see an incorporation of my morning challenge in more classrooms. I think that would be hugely, hugely beneficial. And I'm probably very biased, but I just, at the moment, I can't see anything going on in primary that is that beneficial. So just to have a sort of look at free time, perhaps, how can we utilize time better? I know there's a massive thing in the UK at the moment about increasing school hours and stuff like that. I don't think it's necessary. Yeah. I feel like the time we spent in school is enough. I feel that like there's wasted space, and if we can utilize every second And I'm not talking about slave driving. I'm not talking about working the children to the bone. I'm talking about giving them fun activities that they really want to engage with, so that all that time is used productively because they want to be doing it and they're taking ownership of their own learning.
If I can't help but ask this now, then, if you had £15 billion and you were in the UK, what would you do with it and why then for schools?
£15 billion in the UK. What would I do with it? Crikey, I think coming from a deprived area in Bedford, or at least working in a deprived area in Bedford and seeing deprivation and poverty and how it's affected children, I think I'd just plough lots of money into making sure all these children who are not as privileged have the same opportunities. Working in the UAE, every child in my class has an iPad. Now, I'm not saying that's the perfect scenario, but just have the access to things like the devices. I can go on after my morning challenge and get everyone to look on maps of countries of the world. In my classroom in the Bedford, I would have had to check with the teacher next door whether I could borrow the laptop trolley. It's that sort of scenario. So just really leveling the playing field and making sure everyone has opportunities. This huge, because I think a lot of people that have been out of the UK for some time perhaps don't know about the massive push towards equality that's going on over there. Huge push. So yeah, I'd implore anyone to have a look at what is going on with the sort of equaling out and equality, and just seeing what they think about it. I think it's really important.
Yeah, it's I've worked at both ends of the spectrum as well in the UK. In the UK, fairly deprived inner city school versus very expensive independent school, and it was stark difference, as you can imagine, not only in resourcing but in kind of all other aspects. I think on that side of the argument, I side with give the money to the schools and let them decide how it can be best used and identify the schools that need possibly more than others.
Yeah.
I think that is hugely important. The questions popped up in my head. What would I do in the UAE if we had 15 billion dirhams, and how would I push that into schools? I'm not sure what my answer is on that, and I'm not going to put you on the spot with that unless you don't.
I can tell you what I'd do in my school. I'd get everyone a lovely smart screen. I used a Clever Touch in Bedford, and it was the best thing I've ever had in my life. Coming over here to a projector that you can't quite see because it's too bright in the room was a bit mind-blowing. So yeah, I'll put a Clever Touch in every classroom in the country. There we go.
I think one of my favourite bits of tech, the unsung hero, is the clicker.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
So you can be mobile. That you could buy a lot of clickers with 15 billion. But that's not what I would buy for everybody, I don't think. In terms then of, I think we're approaching sort of 50 minutes now. You've sort of highlighted what you'd like to remove, what you'd like to implement, not only in kind of your school, but thinking back to the UK. And you've kind of hinted at where the site might be going and where you'd like it to go resource-wise. As a content creator, and any opportunity possibly, I've just thrown this idea out there for a student-led website in the future that people could contribute to, rather than an educator-led website.
Yeah, quite possibly. It's a great idea. For me, my niche is student-led. It was what I was really invested in when I first became a teacher. I think it's obviously evolved into Morning Challenge, but student-led processes are really what I'm into. So I'd love to develop something like that and embed more of it in classrooms. I don't think it's something that's commonly used. I don't think it's a really widely used teaching technique. And to be honest, certain people, I'm definitely not going to name names or age groups, but a lot of people don't really understand why. I've been laughed at in the past, sniggered at. Why is he doing that? I've had some difficult times in the classroom doing what I've done, but it's always produced progress. I don't think there's been a single time where I've looked back and said this wasn't positive or beneficial. So yeah, absolutely.
Anyone that's kind of watching this, whether live or back on replay, what would your kind of 3 main bits of advice be for fostering a student-led classroom?
Allowing the children to identify their strengths and weaknesses is a huge moment for them. If you have a child that can say, I'm fantastic at this and I'm not so good at this, you're onto a massive winner. And you'll find every single child, we all know that every single child has got something they're fantastic at, and every single child has got something they're not so fantastic at. So it's that realization, I think, is the biggest thing, fostering that realization. The opportunities to actually do things is hugely important. I was absolutely blessed in Bedford to have a head teacher who let me do absolutely anything. And I did, and I ran with it. And hopefully he was very happy with the results we achieved there. And a third thing, to foster a student-led classroom, really boosting confidence. Confidence is something that takes a lot of work for some children. I've got children in my class now, because they're wearing face masks, that I just cannot hear unless I'm 20 centimeters away from their face. I shouldn't say that. I'm definitely 1.5 meters away. But yeah, just really boosting that confidence, taking any opportunity to speak in front of groups of people. It's something that I was never given the opportunity to do at school, or was rarely given the opportunity to do. So public speaking, when it comes to speaking in front of adults, has been something I've struggled with personally. And I don't want the children that I educate to turn out like mini-me's. I want them to be very confident speaking in front of groups. So yeah, confidence, a huge thing. That's
a really nice sort of close to your 3 points there, Daniel. And actually, I think you kind of highlighted something that could be misinterpreted when you use the phrase kind of student-led classroom, because actually it doesn't matter what strategy you use, everything starts with the teacher. And I think that might be why there could be some stigma around that as a strategy concept.
Yeah.
And the like. I also like what you said there about student discussion, I guess, is kind of where you're going, and student evaluation. I remember sitting in, this was some time ago now, in Leicester in the UK at Teaching and Learning Conference, and seeing Austin's butterfly for the first time, and that concept. And for me, that's kind of what I frame some of these concepts around. A student doing some work, receiving feedback from all of the peers, improving the work based on their advice and feedback, and kind of a support structure, I guess, to make progress. And that's what it's all about.
I definitely feel like I'd rather be called a facilitator of learning, to be honest. I mean, I want it to be my job to help children learn. I don't want to be someone that just nags them or talks monotone to them and stands at the front of the classroom and reels off stuff from a PowerPoint. I want the children to want to take ownership. I want them to be in the classroom because they want to be there. And I want them to take the lead. So yeah, I want to facilitate the learning rather than teach as such.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point. I've seen it referred to before, rather than as student-led learning, as peer-assisted learning. Going back to that idea of kind of collegiality and students supporting one another in their endeavours to ensure that they meet their and the teacher's expectation. And that concept as well of facilitating, I think, is really important. Quite often, I think teachers feel like they have to be the one directing all the time, but there is a point where you do have to step back and let the students take some form of ownership of their learning within a classroom setting. What's your stance then on kind of blended learning and others?
E.g., the hybrid approach that we're doing at the moment. I think it's probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do as a teacher. I'm not sure how it's run in your school, but for me, I'll have a group of children who are at home. I'll be speaking and communicating with them through an earpiece, so that deafens me in one ear. And then obviously all the children in the class have their face masks on, so there's no ability to see their lips moving. And many of them, like I say, in year 4, are very, very quiet as mice. So it's really, really hard. The amount of times I have to ask the children to speak up every day is probably very boring for them. It's tough. but it's just something we've got to do, isn't it?
Yeah, no, everyone's in the same boat. I think the reality, and it's about trying to be slightly imaginative with it where you can, to facilitate some form of group work where, some of the best things that I've seen in some of my classrooms is pairing face-to-face students with the online students, and ensuring that there's that interaction across the classroom. Otherwise, my worry is that the online students can end up being a little bit passive in everything.
Absolutely.
Not feeling, going back to that connected and collegiate approach that is so important in our classrooms.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely got a mix of online learners. I've got the children who really want to get involved. I've got others who are maybe a little bit shy that don't get so involved. And I will find myself communicating with one in particular throughout the lesson, whereas the others take a back seat. And it is difficult, but you're right. You can pair them with people. I send people out into the corridor with their headphones, and they'll speak, and they'll run breakout rooms with them. So that's much more interactive. That's a really good idea.
Yeah, it's, the breakout rooms, I wish they came sooner for Teams. It felt like we were kind of hanging on. I kept checking the Microsoft roadmap for when breakout rooms were going to come. But I'm really glad that they are there, because they give us another tool in our kind of arsenal of strategies that we can be a little bit more creative with and involve everybody a little bit more. I'd just like to, we're kind of coming up to wrapping up now, just say a big thank you for giving up your time again, Daniel. Really enjoyed talking to you. If anyone wants to find Daniel online, you can see his handle at The Student Leads, and his website is morningchallenge.co.uk. So please do check that out. And if you're not using it already, trial it with your students. One of the scariest facts for me, in fact, the scariest fact for me tonight has been 50 hours. That's blown my mind a little bit when you think about it. That's 50 hours a year that we could be using fruitfully. So I guess my closing statement to anyone watching this is, are your students and are you maximising those 50 hours? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.